Hey there, I know this is a spur of the moment video. I'm in the middle of doing my list of my 100 favorite action films of all time, but there were a couple other random videos I wanted to do, including this, the news. I know there's news of a new Thing remake, which is completely pointless, but maybe I'll save that for a separate video. This is about Lethal Weapon 5. Lethal Weapon 5. No one needs or wants a Lethal Weapon 5. This comes from someone who enjoys the Lethal Weapon films. The first one is a classic. I like Part 2. Part 3 I liked even more. I'm one of those guys who's a big fan of Part 3. Lethal Weapon 4, I don't hate as much as I used to. It's just there's been so many worse films that come out that's kind of bumped Lethal Weapon 4 up. To go, well, at least Jet Li was pretty cool. Well, at least this and that. At least the ending was a pretty happy ending. But I have a lot of issues with Lethal Weapon 4. A lot of issues. And at Lethal Weapon 4, which was 1998, they were getting too old for this. That was a big part of the plot. A big part of the plot was that they were too old for this. Now it's over 20 years after that. And you want to make a Lethal Weapon 5. Again, no one is asking for this. I mean, let's really look about the other movies. A Good Day to Die Hard, Die Hard 5 was not a box office phenomenon. It was critically panned, rightfully so. It didn't do as well as its predecessors. At least didn't do as well as Die Hard 4. It wasn't nearly as good as the movies Die Hard 4. Die Hard 5 was a crappy film. Rambo 5 Last Blood, once again, did not set the box office on fire. And in my opinion, was a lame, lousy ending to a strong series at that point. Terminator. How many fucking awful Terminator films have we had? And how many Terminator films have bombed? Now you want to go back to the well with Lethal Weapon. Danny Glover. I'm a big fan of Danny Glover. I'm one of the biggest fans of Predator 2 out there. What's the point? When Danny Glover, I hate to say it, he can't do anything anymore. Yeah, I know he was in that new Jumanji film. But granted, I have not seen it. But you know what I would bet? He didn't do a lot of stuff because he's extremely old. I mean, I would actually like to type up how old Danny Glover is. I know Richard Donner is what, 90 years old? And he's going to direct the film? 90 years old. 90. Are we at this point that we have to literally have 90-year-old guys directing action films now? Danny Glover is 73 years old. Mel Gibson, 64. Mel Gibson looks like he could do it. I mean, Mel Gibson I've seen in Get the Gringo, which I liked. Bloodfather, which I didn't mind. Like, Mel Gibson, he was actually one of the only decent parts of Expendables 3. I think Mel Gibson could still do it. Mel Gibson, I could buy. But Danny Glover, again, these guys are way too old. I mean, it's the whole cliche. We're too old for this shit. But that story arc, if that's the story arc that they do, they already did in Lethal Weapon 4. They already did it. I mean, what was it? In the first Lethal Weapon, Danny Glover was already ready to retire his character, Roger Murtaugh. Now, after how many decades you still do it? That's what I mean, is that, does anyone actually believe Lethal Weapon 5 will be a good movie? Look at Die Hard 5. Look at the recent Terminator films. Look at Rambo Last Blood. which was a boring as hell movie with a meh finale. And again, Richard Donner, you have a guy, Richard Donner, I respect. He did The Goonies, he did the first Superman movie, he did all the previous Lethal Weapon films, but the guy's 90 years old. He hasn't directed a film since, 16 Blocks with Bruce Willis? Which I didn't mind. Wasn't great, but I didn't mind it. It's too late. It's too little too late. And it's just... This don't sound harsh, but you know what? Sometimes you have to sound harsh. It's sad and pathetic. It's sad and pathetic. Well, that's too harsh. No. No one wants to say it. But it's the fucking truth. I don't need to see countless franchises resuscitated. To call the paramedic clear and resuscitate franchise after franchise after franchise because people are begging. I don't know who's begging for it. I really don't. But apparently someone, whether studios, maybe the general public, I don't know. But even the general public didn't go out in droves to see The Last Die Hard or Rambo or Terminator. So again, you know what? Is this because Bad Boys 3 was a hit? Is that why? Bad Boys for Life was a hit? At all. That was a buddy cop film from back in the day. It got a sequel. It made a huge box office opening weekend money, becoming very highly successful. Even critics enjoyed it, surprisingly enough. Let's do to another buddy cop film. But Lethal Weapon 5, the difference is Will Smith and Martin Lawrence are not 77 years old. Do I want to see 77-year-old bad boys? No. Do I want to see really, really old Murtaugh Ridge? No. I don't. Would I like to be surprised? Of course I would like to be surprised. That's what people don't realize. I would love to be surprised. I would always love to be surprised. And part of me's going, who knows if this will actually get made, because so many times movies get announced that get made. Remember back in the day, oh, they're going to do a remake to Big Trouble in Little China with The Rock. Have heard nothing since. Oh, they're going to do a remake of Cliffhanger. Heard nothing ever since. Oh, they're going to do Stallone, he's finally going to do that movie Hunter. Nothing. So this could be one of those things that in a month or a few months it'll be forgotten about and they won't go ahead. And they shouldn't. Because again, no one is asking for Lethal Weapon 5. And if you are, my question to you is why? Oh, okay, you like Riggs and Murtaugh. I like Riggs and Murtaugh. But how many times have they come back for one more, but it ends in disaster? And Lethal Weapon 4 wasn't a great movie. And they were over 20 years younger than they are now. I was actually surprised to see Danny Glover was 73. I thought he'd be older. But I'm looking up the age of Richard Donner, because he's directing it. 89 years old. 89 years old. I mean, that's like, hey, I want Gene Hackman to come back as a 90-year-old, because he's 90, Gene Hackman, a 90-year-old Lex Luthor. No, not really. Maybe it's one of those things, I don't need to see my action heroes old. Have them forever young. I don't need to see these characters so old. it's kind of depressing. It kind of is. Because you watch these films, I want to think on my own what happened to them in the future. You could create your own multiple stories. Not be spoon-fed it to you. And again, what story? What, you don't have either a new team who Murtaugh and Riggs are supposed to train or supposed to converse with, but Murtaugh and Riggs have more experience, which is a little bit what they did with Bad Boys 3. Or you don't go that route, or you don't go with, oh, well, Riggs' child who's grown up, that kid is a police officer, or that kid is in trouble with the bad guys, or then Riggs sacrifices himself for his kid, or has to fight his own kid, like Bad Boys 3. I mean, any story I'm thinking of is not that interesting. It really isn't. Let's create new stories. Let's create new franchises. Let's create new action movie franchises. Dread, which I loved, saw in the theater, that should have been a new action franchise. John Wick, that's a great new action franchise. Let's see new stuff. Now, just because it's new doesn't automatically make it good, but we don't need to be resuscitating every fucking thing from the 80s and 90s. That's why I don't look forward to The Matrix 4. I don't look forward... Bill and Ted 3, I was kind of interested in, but I'm worried that will be another Dumb and Dumber 2. That's what I'm worried about. Very rarely do you get a sequel from years ago. Blade Runner 2049 was an example of that working out well. But that's the exception, not the rule. I mean, I hate to be the bearer of bad news, but they're too old for this shit. They're too old. I love the characters. Love the actors. Just do a full-length documentary on the franchise. A new full-length documentary. Put it out there to watch on Vimeo or YouTube or whatever the hell else. Do a new full-length documentary on all 4 films. I think that would be better. Again, I just don't see the appeal of an 89, 90-year-old director trying to do an action film in today's age with Roger Murtaugh, his character didn't do much in the older films, which is understandable because, you know, Riggs, he was more the Lethal Weapon, the title character, so to speak. And Roger Murtaugh would shoot. But even now, with the way Danny Glover looks and the way his body's at, and he just can't do much. That's not a knock against him. That's just how it is. You gotta look at it realistically on that front. Mel Gibson, he's 60-some years old. He can still do some stuff, but it doesn't need to be a fucking... I would have been more interested if Mel Gibson was in Mad Max Fury Road. An aging, semi-retired Mad Max doing his last or one of his last missions or one of his last things. Like, if you took Mad Max Fury Road and instead of Tom Hardy, it was Mel Gibson, I think I would love the fuck out of it. There's aspects I like about it, I just don't like Tom Hardy in it. But if Mel Gibson was in that, I would have loved it. But I'm going on long enough. It's like 15 minutes in. But yeah, I don't understand why we needed Lethal Weapon 5. The TV show, there was a TV show lasted like 3 seasons. I guarantee it's because Bad Boys for Life was a hit. So they see a buddy cop film, let's bring another buddy cop film back. and also try to get some nostalgia dollars. Which again, nostalgia dollars are not really that concrete when you look at the dismal box office of the recent Terminator films, or the disappointing box office of Die Hard 5. Fuck, Rambo Last Blood was a blip. People forget Rambo First Blood Part 2 was the biggest hit. One of the biggest gargantuan hits, making like over 300 million worldwide, 150 million in the US. That's how big Rambo First Blood Part 2 was. And then you get to Rambo 5 and it becomes a blip. Lethal Weapon 5 is not needed. It could very easily come off as goofy or funny, but not on purpose. Now, it'll purposely be funny, because the Lethal Weapon films are, but maybe it'll come off comical, not in the sense that they're thinking of. But hey, if I'm proven wrong, I'll admit it. But you know what? I'm glad I was wrong. But don't hold your breath. Either way, thanks for watching. Take care. And we'll see you in another video later.